We regard the imposition of any new tariffs or any tariffs on steel or aluminum between our two countries as absolutely unacceptable.
Canada faces the biggest impact from new duties, and in a moment we'll talk about the government's plan to fight back if we are indeed hit with Trump's tariffs. We'll also look at whether those duties will hurt more American jobs than they actually help. But that possibility and even a massive plunge in the stock markets isn't dissuading the president from doubling down on the protectionist rhetoric. Trump may think trade wars are easy to win, but much of the planet does not, including many Trump loyalists. As Lindsay Duncombe explains, they're worried about retaliation and what it could mean for the American economy.
D.C. was paralyzed today by blasting, churning winds, fitting somehow as the American economy braces for impact. These tariffs could hurt.
It's going to turn around and bite American citizens with much higher taxes, much higher costs, and it's going to discombobulate our whole international trading system.
Trump's plan would raise steel prices domestically, good for steel companies, bad for every other company that uses steel, from car manufacturers to beer brewers to retailers. The message today was this plan will cost Americans money and jobs. The Wall Street Journal went so far as to call it the biggest blunder of Trump's presidency. Retaliation is a big concern. Country after country after country, including Canada, came out against the plan. The European Union vowing to slap 25% tariffs on the most American of exports: motorcycles, bourbon, blue jeans.
The EU will react firmly and commensurately to defend our interests.
This is a can of Campbell's soup.
Armed with props, the Commerce Secretary argued any price increase would be minimal.
This is scare tactics by the people who want the status quo.
And the president seemed to welcome the storm of criticism, tweeting, "Trade wars are good and easy to win." Not quite, according to trade experts.
He was born yesterday. Nobody wins a trade war, right? Trade wars are just, they're wars. We're going to destroy your cost structure. We're going to reduce your personal income. You're going to do the same to us.
Another reason why this proposal has rattled so many industries is so far, Donald Trump's trade moves haven't lived up to his protectionist bluster. And there's concern this could just be the start. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
And caught in the middle of all this, Canadian steel and aluminum makers facing the prospect of hefty tariffs and a trade war. But as Susan Lund shows us, right now, their hands are just tied.
In the heart of Steel Town, people are waiting anxiously.
I'm a little worried. There seems to be some bravery on the part of the company, but it's not necessarily us. I mean, it's our suppliers too, right?
Others think it's just Trump's way of getting a better NAFTA deal.
No, I'm not worried. Not at all. No, in fact, I don't even think he's going to come out with it next week. I think he's going to say, I need a little bit more time to talk this out. I mean, he's a negotiator.
A local union rep says tough times are ahead if Canada doesn't get an exemption.
I'd say that it'd cause mass chaos if tariffs were imposed, and especially, there will likely be some type of retaliation.
The president of one of Canada's biggest unions, Unifor, is at the NAFTA talks in Mexico and says there's only one retaliation that will work.
The Canadian government has to say to the United States, if you don't exempt us from the tariffs on steel and aluminum, then we're walking away from NAFTA, and we are going to be punitive as well.
The Prime Minister was asked today what he's doing to make sure Canada is exempt from these tariffs.
We will continue to engage with all levels of the American administration in the coming days so that they understand that this proposal is unacceptable.
Senior government officials say Trudeau has not spoken with Trump since news of these duties came out yesterday. No phone call is planned, but the government says it is preparing.
We reserve the right to take responsive measures to defend our trade interests and Canadian workers.
The Canadian Steel Producers Association is also worried about what happens to steel from countries that are affected by the tariff.
Those volumes of steel would come to Canada and could potentially swamp our domestic market.
Cabinet ministers are reaching out to repeat Canada's request to be exempt, and the government says it's looking at all options. Susan Lunn, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, Trump's own arguments for trade barriers seem to be mostly about jobs and economic growth in the United States. But trade experts warn that the tariffs could actually do more harm than good. And they only need point to President George W. Bush to show why.
We believe the actions that the president is taking today can help restore the strength and profitability of this very important American industry.
In 2002, Bush slapped tariffs of up to 30% on some steel products, but the plan had the exact opposite effect on the economy. By trying to help the steel industry, it ended up hurting much bigger ones.
The losers are any company that buys steel, and that means they're going to pass those costs on to their customers.
Millions of jobs depend on using metal, like construction and the auto industry, compared to the only 100,000 or so steel workers. The impact of higher steel prices destroyed more jobs than those it was meant to protect. In fact, one study found 200,000 jobs lost in the U.S. because of the 2002 tariffs. Workers laid off in every single state. The Bush White House withdrew those duties a year later, admitting they had backfired.
Safeguards unavoidably impose some additional costs on consumers.
The tariffs then were different, as was the state of the economy. But 15 years later, the concerns about the tariffs are the same.